May 15, 1943. The North African sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift prisoner cages near Tunis as Oberstfreiter Hans Müller clutched his empty stomach. For the past 6 months, the Afrika Korps had subsisted on dwindling rations that would have been inadequate for civilians. Black bread made with sawdust filler, ersatz coffee brewed from acorns, and meat so scarce that a single tin of sardines shared among 8 men was considered a feast. Müller, a 23-year-old baker's son from Dusseldorf, had not tasted real beef in over a year. His daily ration consisted of 300 grams of bread, 20 grams of fat, and occasional horse meat when supply lines permitted. Like most German soldiers in North Africa, he had lost nearly 30 pounds since arriving in 1942. His ribs protruded visibly, and his uniform hung loose on his diminished frame. The surrender at Tunisia had come almost as a relief. Anything seemed better than the gnawing hunger that had become their constant companion. German supply lines across the Mediterranean had been strangled by Allied naval power, leaving Rommel's once proud Afrika Korps to scavenge for food in the desert. Many soldiers had resorted to eating grass, roots, and whatever indigenous plants they could identify as edible. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann, a career soldier from Bavaria, kept a detailed diary throughout the North African campaign. His entries from the final weeks paint a stark picture. April 18th, no bread today. Shared 1 tin of meat paste among 12 men. Schmidt fainted during morning formation. We are eating our leather equipment boiled in salt water. The psychological impact of chronic hunger had transformed proud Wehrmacht soldiers into desperate scavengers. Units fought over scraps. Officers hoarded their marginally better rations while enlisted men fantasized about the simplest foods from home: warm bread, fresh milk, a piece of cheese. The Nazi propaganda about German superiority rang hollow when spoken by men whose bodies were consuming their own muscle mass to survive. As Allied forces closed in during the final weeks of the North African campaign, German soldiers faced a choice between death and surrender. Many chose to surrender not from cowardice, but from the basic human need for sustenance. The prospect of regular meals in Allied captivity seemed preferable to starvation in service to the Reich. The irony was not lost on the more perceptive soldiers. Germany, which claimed to be creating a 1,000-year empire, could not adequately feed its own troops. The logistics of maintaining supply lines across conquered territories had proven beyond German capabilities, while the Allies seemed to possess unlimited resources for both warfare and sustenance. When the final surrender came on May 13, 1943, approximately 275,000 German and Italian soldiers laid down their arms. Among them were veterans of some of Germany's greatest victories, men who had conquered Poland, France, and initially driven deep into the Soviet Union. Now they stood defeated, emaciated, and desperate for the most basic necessity of life: food. The first indication that American captivity would be different came during the initial processing at Allied prisoner cages near Tunis. American medics examined the German prisoners and were shocked by their physical condition. Many showed signs of severe malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and dehydration. American military doctors immediately implemented emergency feeding protocols, starting with liquid nutrients and gradually introducing solid foods to prevent refeeding syndrome. June 3, 1943. Camp Shelby, Mississippi. The cattle cars that had transported German prisoners from the port of Norfolk had been replaced by passenger coaches for the final leg of their journey, an early sign that their captivity would defy every expectation shaped by Nazi propaganda about American weakness and barbarism. The transformation from freight transport to passenger accommodation represented more than mere logistics. It symbolized a fundamental difference in how Americans viewed human dignity, even when applied to enemy combatants. When the prison trucks arrived at Camp Shelby, the first thing that struck Oberstfreiter Müller was not the barbed wire or guard towers, but the smell wafting from the camp kitchen. Real meat was cooking, not the processed substitutes they had known in Germany, but actual beef. The aroma was so foreign to men who had subsisted on ersatz foods that many initially couldn't identify it. Several prisoners thought they were hallucinating, a common symptom among severely malnourished individuals. The camp mess hall itself defied comprehension. Built in just 6 weeks by American military engineers, it could serve 5,000 men simultaneously. Electric lighting illuminated rows of tables set with metal trays, cups, and utensils. Steam tables kept food warm, and refrigeration units preserved perishables, technologies that many German prisoners had never seen deployed on such a scale. The kitchen facility alone was larger than entire buildings in many German towns. American engineering efficiency was evident in every detail. Multiple serving lines prevented bottlenecks. Hot water systems provided unlimited supplies for cleaning. Ventilation systems removed cooking odors and maintained comfortable temperatures. The organizational capability required to feed thousands of prisoners 3 meals daily exceeded anything most Germans had witnessed, even in their own military. But nothing could have prepared them for their first meal as prisoners of war. Kitchen staff, many of them German-speaking Americans of immigrant heritage, served each prisoner portions that exceeded what most had eaten in months. A thick slice of roast beef, weighing approximately 6 ounces, mashed potatoes with real butter, green beans, white bread, and coffee made from actual coffee beans, not the chicory and acorn substitutes they had known for years. The beef alone represented a revelation. In Germany, even before the war, beef consumption was limited primarily to the wealthy and special occasions. Most German families ate beef perhaps once monthly, if at all. Pork and poultry were more common proteins, and even these had disappeared from civilian diets by 1942. Here in American captivity, enemy prisoners received beef as a regular meal component. Feldwebel Zimmermann recorded the moment in his diary with trembling hands. They placed before me more meat than my entire company received in a week during our final months in Africa. I stared at it for several minutes, unable to believe it was real. The meat was tender, properly cooked, seasoned with spices I had forgotten existed. When I finally tasted the beef, I wept. Not from joy, but from the realization of how completely we had been deceived about America's capabilities. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating to Nazi ideology. These men had been told that America was a nation of soft, luxury-addicted weaklings who would collapse under the pressure of total war. The propaganda had painted Americans as unable to sacrifice, unwilling to endure hardship, and incapable of sustained military effort. Yet here were their captors, casually providing enemy prisoners with food superior to what German soldiers received in active service. Private Heinrich Weber, captured with the 90th Light Division, wrote in a letter home that somehow passed American censors. The Americans serve us 3 meals daily, each one larger than what we received as soldiers fighting for the fatherland. Yesterday they gave us steaks, actual beef steaks, cooked to our preference. I asked for mine well done, fearing it might be some cruel joke, but it was real meat, tender and flavorful beyond anything I had tasted. Weber's letter continued with details that seemed impossible to German recipients. They asked how I wanted my steak prepared. In Germany, we were grateful for any meat, in any condition. Here, enemy prisoners are given choices about food preparation. The kitchen staff treats cooking as a craft, not merely a necessity. They take pride in feeding us well, as if we were guests rather than captives. The camp kitchen staff, observing the prisoners' amazement, began to understand the depth of German deprivation. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, a cook from Chicago whose grandparents had immigrated from Bavaria, later recalled, "These boys would just stare at their food for the longest time before eating. They'd save half their portions, hiding bread in their pockets like they expected the next meal might not come. It took weeks to convince them the food was real and would continue." O'Brien's observations revealed behavioral patterns common among starvation survivors. They ate very slowly, savoring each bite like it was their last meal. Some would arrange their food carefully on the plate, as if it was too beautiful to disturb. Others would eat everything immediately, then look around nervously, expecting someone to take their plates away. None of them wasted even the smallest crumb. American military regulations required that prisoner rations equal those provided to American garrison troops. This meant German POWs were receiving approximately 4,000 calories per day, nearly double what German combat soldiers had been allocated even before the supply crisis in North Africa. The contrast became even starker when prisoners learned that this abundance was considered normal by American standards. The morning routine alone demonstrated American organizational efficiency. Breakfast began at 6 a.m. sharp, with prisoners fed in organized groups of 200. Each man received scrambled eggs, bacon or sausage, toast, butter, jam, coffee, and fresh milk. The quantity and quality exceeded what most Germans had eaten for breakfast even in peacetime. Eggs, rationed to 2 per month for German civilians since 1940, were served daily to prisoners. The waste shocked them most profoundly. Kitchen scraps from a single meal at Camp Shelby exceeded the food supplies their entire companies had received in Africa. Potato peels were discarded rather than saved for soup. Bread crusts were thrown away. Milk that had sat too long was poured out. To men conditioned by years of scarcity, such waste seemed impossible, even criminal. Dr. Friedrich Bauer, a Wehrmacht medical officer captured at Tunisia, observed the transformation among his fellow prisoners with clinical precision. Within 2 weeks of regular American rations, men who had appeared skeletal began to regain weight and strength. But more significant was the change in their thinking. They began to question everything we had been told about American industrial capacity and resources. His medical notes documented the physical recovery. Average weight gain of 2 to 3 pounds weekly among severely malnourished prisoners. Improvement in muscle tone, skin condition, and energy levels exceeds expectations. Mental clarity returns as proper nutrition addresses cognitive impairment caused by prolonged starvation. Most remarkable is the change in psychological outlook as physical health improves. The quality of the food matched its quantity. American beef came from cattle raised on abundant grasslands and grain that Germany could never match. The marbling and tenderness indicated animals fed on corn and grass rather than scraps and industrial waste. Vegetables were fresh, often locally grown, delivered daily to the camp kitchens. The logistics required to maintain such supply chains during wartime demonstrated organizational capabilities that dwarfed German achievements. Dairy products provided another revelation. Fresh milk, cream, butter, and cheese were available daily. In Germany, milk had been rationed since 1939, with most civilians receiving powdered substitutes when available. Real butter had disappeared from most German tables by 1941, replaced by margarine made from uncertain ingredients. Here, prisoners consumed dairy products freely, without thought to rationing or substitution. Even basic items like salt and sugar, rationed severely in Germany since 1939, were available without restriction. Sugar, a luxury that German children had not tasted in years, was provided freely for coffee and food preparation. The prisoners could sweeten their coffee to taste, a simple pleasure that had been impossible in Germany for most of the war. The coffee itself represented American abundance. Real coffee beans, properly roasted and ground, produced beverages that resembled what Germans remembered from before the war. Since 1940, German coffee had been ersatz, mixtures of roasted grain, acorns, and chicory that bore no resemblance to actual coffee. Many younger prisoners had never tasted real coffee in their lives. Lunch and dinner followed similar patterns of abundance. Typical meals included substantial protein portions, multiple vegetables, bread, dessert, and beverages. Sunday dinners featured special preparations, roasted chicken or turkey, multiple side dishes, pies, and ice cream. The Sunday menu alone exceeded what most German families had eaten for Christmas before the war. The ice cream particularly astounded prisoners. This luxury required not only abundant dairy production, but sophisticated refrigeration technology. Most German prisoners had never tasted ice cream, which required industrial ice production and storage capabilities that Germany lacked even in peacetime. The casual serving of ice cream to enemy prisoners demonstrated technological and resource advantages that seemed almost magical. American food service extended beyond mere nutrition to consideration of prisoner preferences and dietary requirements. Kitchen staff attempted to accommodate individual requests when possible. Prisoners with digestive problems received modified diets. Those with religious dietary restrictions were accommodated. This attention to individual needs contrasted sharply with German military practices, where uniformity was enforced regardless of personal requirements. The camp canteen, operated by civilian organizations, provided additional evidence of American abundance. Prisoners could purchase candy, soft drinks, tobacco, and snacks using wages earned from work details. Items that had been luxuries for the German middle class before the war were available for purchase by enemy prisoners. Coca-Cola, chocolate bars, chewing gum, and cigarettes could be bought freely. Local American communities contributed additional food through church and civic organizations. German prisoners received care packages containing homemade cookies, candies, and preserved foods. The psychological impact was profound. Americans were voluntarily sharing their abundance with enemies who had recently been trying to kill American soldiers. This generosity from civilian populations demonstrated national confidence and resource security. The medical treatment of malnutrition cases revealed American healthcare capabilities. Severely undernourished prisoners received specialized diets designed to restore health gradually. Medical monitoring prevented refeeding syndrome while maximizing recovery rates. German medical officers, working alongside American doctors, learned techniques and had access to medications that were unavailable in Germany, even for German military personnel. By midsummer 1943, German prisoners at American camps were eating better than they had as civilians in Germany before the war. The contrast with their recent experience as combat soldiers was even more dramatic. Men who had dreamed of a single potato now faced the daily reality of surplus abundance provided by their enemies. The transformation was not merely physical, but psychological. Prisoners began to question fundamental assumptions about the war, about America, and about their own government's capabilities. If American industrial capacity could provide such abundance to enemy prisoners, what did this reveal about relative national strength? How could Germany hope to achieve victory against a nation that demonstrated such overwhelming resource advantages? The daily routine of abundant meals became a form of ideological education more powerful than any propaganda program. Each well-prepared meal, each surplus portion, each casual waste of food that would have been treasured in Germany served as evidence that Nazi assumptions about American weakness were fundamentally incorrect. August 12, 1943. Camp Hearne, Texas. The sight of American food production would prove more devastating to Nazi ideology than any military defeat. German prisoners assigned to work details in Texas agriculture witnessed an industrial food system that operated on a scale beyond European comprehension. Oberstfreiter Muller, now working on a cotton farm outside Bryan, Texas, observed the farmer's family eating breakfast. 3 eggs per person, thick slices of bacon, toast made from white flour, and fresh milk from their own cows. The family consumed more protein in a single meal than a German family received in weekly rations. When Muller mentioned this to the farmer, the man seemed genuinely puzzled that anyone would consider such portions unusual. The farm itself challenged every assumption about American agriculture. Mechanized equipment that would have been the pride of entire German districts was considered standard on individual American farms. Tractors worth more than most Germans earned in a lifetime were common tools. The farmer owned 3 different harvesting machines, each designed for specific crops. "We planted 500 acres of corn this year," the farmer explained to Muller through an interpreter. "Expect to harvest about 60 bushels per acre. That's low for this soil. We had drought in May." The numbers staggered Muller. This single American farm would produce more grain than entire German counties. Moreover, much of the harvest was destined to feed livestock, not humans, a luxury Germany had abandoned years earlier. Feldwebel Zimmermann, working at a cattle ranch near Houston, documented the abundance. "Today I watched them slaughter a single steer that would provide more meat than my entire village in Bavaria sees in a month. They do this daily." The rancher owns 2,000 head of cattle and considers this a modest operation. He showed me photographs of ranches in Texas with 50,000 cattle. The scale is incomprehensible. The industrial processing facilities astounded the prisoners even more. At a Coca-Cola bottling plant in San Antonio, German POWs observed production lines that processed more sugar in a day than Germany imported in a month. The plant operated 3 shifts, producing a luxury beverage that Americans consumed casually, while Germany had eliminated sugar from civilian rations entirely. Dr. Bauer, assigned to work at a hospital in Austin, gained access to American food distribution systems. He wrote, "The hospital cafeteria discards more edible food daily than most German hospitals receive weekly. Not spoiled food, but surplus. They prepare 20% more than needed to ensure adequate supplies. The excess is waste they can afford because their production is unlimited." American prisoners of war policies required compliance with Geneva Convention standards. but the Americans exceeded these requirements dramatically. International law mandated that prisoners receive rations equivalent to depot troops, soldiers stationed away from combat. American depot troops ate exceptionally well by global standards, and German prisoners benefited accordingly. The contrast became most apparent during holiday meals. Christmas 1943 provided German prisoners with turkey, ham, cranberry sauce, stuffing, multiple vegetables, pies, and ice cream. Many prisoners had never tasted ice cream, which required both refrigeration technology and abundant dairy production. The Christmas feast exceeded what most had eaten at any single meal in their entire lives. Lieutenant Walter Schmidt, captured with the 21st Panzer Division, wrote in his journal, "They served us Christmas dinner with such abundance that several men became ill from overeating. Not because the food was spoiled, but because our stomachs could not handle such quantities after years of deprivation. The American guards were apologetic about our discomfort, as if they had failed us as hosts." Local American communities contributed additional food through church and civic organizations. German prisoners received care packages containing homemade cookies, candies, and preserved foods. The psychological impact was profound. Americans were voluntarily sharing their abundance with enemies who had recently been trying to kill American soldiers. The camp canteens, operated by the YMCA and other civilian organizations, offered prisoners the opportunity to purchase additional food items with the wages they earned from their work details. German prisoners could buy candy bars, soft drinks, tobacco, and snacks, items that had been luxuries for the German middle class before the war and had disappeared entirely during wartime rationing. American agricultural abundance extended beyond quantity to quality and variety. German prisoners tasted tropical fruits imported from Central America, grain products from the Midwest, dairy goods from Wisconsin, and beef from Texas. This diversity of food sources demonstrated a distribution network that spanned the continent, moving products efficiently across thousands of miles. The waste continued to astound them. Perfectly edible food was discarded for minor cosmetic flaws. Overripe fruit was composted rather than consumed. Restaurants threw away portions that customers couldn't finish. To German minds conditioned by scarcity, such waste seemed not just extravagant, but almost immoral. March 15, 1944. Camp Trinidad, Colorado. 9 months of American abundance had fundamentally altered German prisoners' understanding of the war, their homeland, and their former ideology. The simple act of eating 3 meals daily had accomplished what no propaganda program could achieve: the complete demolition of Nazi myths about American weakness and German superiority. Oberstfreiter Muller, now weighing 40 pounds more than when he arrived in American captivity, reflected on his transformation in a letter to his family. "I cannot describe to you the abundance here without seeming to lie. Yesterday, the camp kitchen served steak, potatoes, vegetables, bread, butter, milk, and fruit for lunch. This was not a special occasion. This was Tuesday. They serve meat twice daily, every day, and the quality exceeds what we ate on Christmas before the war." The psychological evolution extended beyond gratitude for better food to fundamental questions about the nature of the conflict. If America could casually feed enemy prisoners better than Germany fed its own soldiers, what did this reveal about relative national strength? If American industrial capacity could produce such abundance during wartime, how could Germany hope to achieve victory? Muller's letters, now passing American censors without difficulty, revealed a profound ideological transformation. The guards tell us that every American family eats meat daily, that children drink milk with every meal, that sugar is unlimited except by artificial price controls. I thought they were lying until I worked on American farms and saw the production with my own eyes. Mother, we have been deceived about everything. America is not weak or decadent. They are simply too powerful to comprehend. Dr. Bauer, now working in the camp hospital alongside American medical personnel, observed the medical improvements among his fellow prisoners with clinical precision. Malnutrition symptoms that had plagued us for months disappeared within weeks of proper feeding. Men gained weight, muscle mass returned, vitamin deficiencies were corrected. But more significant was the change in mental health. Despair gave way to curiosity, fanaticism to questioning. His medical documentation revealed the extent of the transformation. Average weight gain among severely malnourished prisoners reached 3 to 4 pounds weekly until normal body weight was restored. Cognitive function improved dramatically as proper nutrition addressed neurological damage caused by prolonged starvation. Depression and anxiety disorders, common among combat veterans and starvation survivors, showed marked improvement with adequate nutrition and humane treatment. The camp educational programs, attended by over 15,000 German prisoners across American facilities by spring 1944, addressed questions about American society that food abundance had raised. How could a democracy feed its people so well? What economic systems enabled such production? Why did Americans share their prosperity with enemies? Classes in American government, economics, and agriculture drew enthusiastic participation from prisoners who had witnessed firsthand the prosperity these systems produced. German engineers studied American industrial methods. Farmers learned about mechanization, fertilizers, and crop rotation techniques that tripled productivity. Medical personnel observed American healthcare systems that provided superior treatment to all patients regardless of nationality or social status. Feldwebel Zimmermann, now teaching German language classes to American soldiers in exchange for courses in American agriculture, wrote extensive notes that would later influence West German farming practices. I have learned more about farming in 6 months of American captivity than in 20 years of German agriculture. Their methods produce 3 times our yields while requiring less labor. They achieve this through mechanization, scientific fertilizers, and crop rotation techniques that German farmers consider impossible. His agricultural education revealed the scientific foundation of American abundance. Hybrid corn varieties developed by agricultural colleges produced yields that German farmers considered fantasy. Chemical fertilizers increased soil productivity beyond European experience. Mechanical harvesters eliminated labor bottlenecks that limited German production. The integration of research, education, and practical application created agricultural systems that supported both rural prosperity and urban food security. The transformation was not limited to individual prisoners, but extended to their understanding of their homeland's prospects. Letters from Germany, when they arrived, painted pictures of continued shortages, rationing, and decline. Meanwhile, prisoners in America witnessed a society that seemed to grow more prosperous even while fighting a global war. Private Weber received a letter from his mother describing conditions in Munich. We stand in lines for 2 hours to receive 200 grams of bread. The ersatz coffee is made from acorns again. Little Hermann, the neighbor's boy, has not seen chocolate in 2 years. The authorities promise victory, but we grow weaker while they claim we grow stronger. Weber's response, written after a dinner of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie, captured the surreal contrast. Mother, last night they served us ice cream for dessert. Real ice cream, made with fresh cream and sugar. I could not finish my portion, something that would have been impossible to imagine 6 months ago. The guards joke that we are all getting fat. They mean it kindly, but the irony is painful. We eat better as prisoners than you do as free citizens. American camp newspapers, produced by prisoners themselves under minimal censorship, began featuring articles about post-war reconstruction, democratic governance, and economic systems. The contrast with Nazi propaganda became stark. American sources acknowledged problems and failures while Nazi sources claimed perpetual success despite obvious shortages and military defeats. The newspapers reflected the prisoners' evolving worldview. Articles discussed agricultural techniques observed during work details, democratic principles learned in civics classes, and economic theories that explained American prosperity. Editorials questioned Nazi ideology while avoiding direct criticism that might endanger families in Germany. The transformation from fanatical nationalism to thoughtful inquiry occurred through exposure to evidence rather than coercion. Private Weber, now working at a canning factory in California, observed American food preservation technology that revolutionized his understanding of industrial capability. This single facility processes more fruits and vegetables daily than all of Bavaria. They seal food in metal containers that preserve it for years without spoilage. American soldiers on every battlefield eat fresh vegetables preserved by this technology. Meanwhile, German soldiers receive ersatz foods that barely qualify as nutrition. The canning facility demonstrated American industrial efficiency and food safety standards that exceeded European practices. Steam sterilization eliminated bacteria and toxins that plagued German food preservation. Automated filling and sealing machines processed thousands of cans hourly with precision impossible through manual labor. Quality control measures ensured consistent nutrition and flavor. The facility represented industrial sophistication that supported both civilian prosperity and military logistics. The camp libraries, stocked with American books, magazines, and newspapers, exposed prisoners to economic data that explained the abundance they witnessed daily. American agricultural production statistics, industrial output figures, and resource availability data painted a picture of national strength that made German victory appear not just unlikely but impossible. Statistical comparisons proved devastating to Nazi propaganda. American steel production exceeded German output by 400%. Agricultural yields surpassed European averages by 300%. Manufacturing capacity dwarfed German industrial capability even before Allied bombing campaigns began. The numbers revealed a nation with resources so vast that feeding enemy prisoners represented an insignificant expense. By summer 1944, requests for repatriation to Germany had declined dramatically among American-held POWs. Many expressed concerns about returning to a country facing starvation while they had grown accustomed to American abundance. The contrast between their current situation and their homeland's deteriorating condition created profound psychological conflicts. Lieutenant Schmidt, working as a translator for American intelligence services, articulated the dilemma in his personal journal. How can I return to Germany knowing what I know now? How can I watch my family struggle for food when I have seen American abundance? Yet how can I abandon my homeland in its darkest hour? The Americans have shown me prosperity, but Germany remains my country. The most devastating revelation came through American newsreels showing the liberation of concentration camps in Germany. Prisoners who had been fed magnificently by their American captors viewed footage of German civilians and camp inmates dying of starvation in their homeland. The moral implications were inescapable and crushing. The footage of Buchenwald, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen shattered any remaining illusions about Nazi morality. Prisoners who had maintained some loyalty to Germany despite recognizing American superiority now faced evidence of systematic starvation and murder conducted by their own government. Men who had fought bravely for what they believed was a just cause discovered they had served a regime that deliberately starved millions while claiming food shortages. Dr. Bauer, confronted with medical evidence of systematic starvation in concentration camps, wrote his most profound reflection. We complained of hunger as soldiers, but we were starving accidentally due to failed logistics. These people were starved deliberately as policy. We served a government that could have fed its people but chose murder instead. The Americans feed their enemies better than Germany fed its victims. Lieutenant Schmidt, now working as a translator for American intelligence services, wrote his final diary entry as a prisoner of war. We came to America as soldiers of what we believed was a superior nation. We discovered that we were representatives of a country that could not feed its own people while claiming to rule the world. The Americans, whom we called weak and decadent, demonstrated strength through generosity and prosperity through freedom. The repatriation process, beginning in late 1945, returned nearly 400,000 German prisoners to a homeland devastated by war and facing severe food shortages. Many carried with them not just memories of American abundance, but practical knowledge of agricultural and industrial techniques that would prove crucial to Germany's post-war reconstruction. The contrast between American prosperity and German devastation became immediately apparent upon repatriation. Former prisoners, accustomed to 4,000-calorie daily diets, returned to a country where 1,200 calories represented adequate nutrition. Men who had grown fat on American abundance watched their families slowly starve despite Allied food aid that barely prevented mass famine. Former prisoners became advocates for democratic governance and free market economics in the emerging West German state. Their first-hand experience of American prosperity provided credible testimony that democracy could produce both freedom and abundance, a message that proved crucial to Germany's transformation from totalitarian state to democratic ally. The economic reconstruction of West Germany drew heavily on techniques learned by former prisoners during their American captivity. Agricultural modernization followed American models observed during work details. Industrial efficiency adopted American production methods. Democratic institutions reflected American constitutional principles studied in camp educational programs. The transformation of Germany from defeated enemy to trusted ally owed much to the ideological conversion accomplished through American abundance. Many former prisoners would return to America as immigrants in the 1950s, becoming American citizens and contributing to the very prosperity that had transformed their understanding of the world. Their children would grow up as Americans, raised on the abundance that their fathers had first encountered as prisoners of war. The final irony was not lost on the former prisoners. They had been captured as enemies of America and had been fed, housed, educated, and treated with dignity that exceeded what their own government had provided. Their transformation from Nazi soldiers to American citizens represented the ultimate triumph of democratic values over totalitarian ideology. The simple act of serving steaks to enemy prisoners had accomplished what military victory alone could not: the complete ideological transformation of German soldiers from Nazi true believers to advocates for democratic capitalism. In the end, America's secret weapon was not superior firepower, but superior abundance, shared generously even with those who had come to destroy it.